A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90. My name is Kenneth Lukwago Anderson, your host. Today, we'll be looking at the hullabaloo over the rationalization of the Uganda Coffee Development Authority. Well, we know since last week there's been an intense debate going on about government's plan to actually phase out the Uganda Coffee Development Authority, return its functions to the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries as a department commanded by a commissioner. Well, the government maintains that nothing so much is going to change, but there is stiff resistance from MPs who are representing communities where coffee is grown, mainly from Buganda region, from what we have seen. And the Uganda caucus has already taken a stand that they will not support this bill. And as you might have heard in our news there, opposition political parties have also weighed in. NUP says its members will stay in the House and fight the bill. FDC has insisted that if you're going to do thorough rationalization, you should look at agencies that do not make value. You phase out those, and those that add value, like Uganda Coffee Development Authority, should be actually left on board. President Yoweri Museveni has weighed in and defended his decision, the decision of his government to actually phase out UCDA, saying that the gains that are being talked about are not primarily those of Uganda Coffee Development Authority. Actually says it's Operation Wealth Creation that caused the boom in coffee that we have seen around. So today I have two experts in studio, one of them an economist, the other is from civil society, but she has been conducting a project around the coffee value chain. So we want to understand exactly, are we losing something with UCDA going back to the ministry, and what can be done to ensure that we do not have the continued tug of war that we're seeing at the moment. My two guests, Dr. Fred Muhumuza, Senior Economist, Director, Economic Forum, Makerere Business School. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening, our listeners, viewers, and my colleagues in the room.
How have you been, Dr. Muhumuza?
I've been okay, trying to take some coffee today to be awake and to test what it looks like, and so that we can have a conversation that is in my mouth and my stomach.
You've been up to now, you have not been taking coffee. You don't know how it feels like.
I do take, but today I decided to take. Sometimes I have to reduce it. You know, you get mixed signals. Others are telling you caffeine, don't put it in your body for medical reasons. Now we don't know where we are. And I don't know whether that is a UCDA solution, or I go to Mulago and mix UCD and Mulago and see where I should lie.
Well, there were some people who were given money to sensitize Ugandans on drinking coffee. If you are senior economist that not know where we stand, then probably we need to ask where that money has gone. Let me introduce Ms. Jane Nalunga, Executive Director, Siatini Uganda. She's a business and trade expert. Good evening, and thank you very much for joining us. And Jane, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing okay. I'm also trying to use coffee oil on my skin. You know, they told me that when you hit the fifth floor and upwards, you lose elasticity, you need collagen. And then they were telling me that when you get coffee oil, wow. So I'm using coffee oil.
Where are you getting the coffee oil?
By the way, I got some coffee oil from Nakori. That's Nakori in Mukono. Then I also got some from Addis Ababa. Yes, very nice oil, but very expensive.
So that's value addition.
And I'm looking younger.
I can see you look younger every now and then. Let's jump into this discussion. It seems you've been actually enjoying the the goods from coffee. And I'll begin with you, Dr. Fred Muhumuza. This debate that is going on about UCDA, how do you look at it?
Well, it's an interesting conversation and debate, but I think it has so much narrowed the issues required for coffee to thrive. Coffee is not about what I am hearing, broad statements out there of foreign exchange earnings that are coming into the country. That's good. But ultimately, it's about household income. If you are to break down, because in the 90s, the analysis was based on household income. And coffee was very, very fundamental in reducing poverty levels. Now, who should be growing coffee? And this is what I'm saying. Number 7 usually comes in and says Chibaro. People with 5-10 acres may be benefiting, but somebody with half an acre, 1 acre, Mwanyiterimba, I don't think that is true. Because some of the yields of coffee we are looking at are giving people, a tree is giving you less than a kilo. So if you only have like 100 or 200 trees, and you are getting 100 kilos or 120, you multiply that by your 6 or 5,000, and coffee lasting that holds, such a person should not be in there. So there's more of a conversation that is missing, that should be looking at what is coffee doing to specific households and who should actually be in coffee. That's one side. The other part, the value chain is very long. It begins with, as she has mentioned, the KITUZA, the agricultural research. And when I look at the yields that the researchers have given to us, Robusta 10, which was, I think, produced in 2017, you're supposed to have over 4,900, around 4,900 kilograms per hectare. Not many people are even getting there. So what clones are they planting? Who is in the process of producing the clones? So you want to not to forget that the beginning of that value chain is actually with the narrow. And the narrow is not in the discussion. It shouldn't be rationalized, of course, it wasn't there and shouldn't be there, but it needs to be leading the discussion on what are the issues with coffee. Who should be planting what clone? Because they have been developing these varieties to match the different conditions in different parts of the country. Because some places you have a lot of coffee wilt disease. Some of them you have diseases that relate to leaves, roots, all sorts of things. So for me, the entity that should be at the heart of this discussion to inform the coffee value chain is actually Narrow. And then Narrow has developed, I think, a Narrow Holdings, which is supposed to engage in multiplication of the planting materials, including supervising private sector. Because they will tell you, if you are the private sector in Mubende, this is what you should be doing. This is the clone you should have for the area of Mubende. This is the other clone you should have. So you don't want to miss out Narrow, meaning that even if you were to remove UCDA and extend the mandate of Narrow, you'd solve part of the problem that UCDA is alleged to have solved. And the president has really thrown a spanner in the works. Have worked closely with OWC. And these fellows, you can clearly see that when they came in the data, volumes of coffee production increased even when the international price for coffee was going down. So people are increasing the volume. Right now, this conversation is because the yields have gone down, but the price is up because of Brazil's challenges out there, the frost. So it is really a windfall that we shouldn't even be attributing to big things in Uganda. Once the Brazilians refocus their attention and come back, you're back to where we were in 1994 when frost in Brazil gave us a good windfall, and government at that time introduced what they called the coffee stabilization tax. We have missed an opportunity because if a coffee, especially on the exporters, leave alone the farmers, because those have not even benefited that much from the increase in the international price. It's these middlemen that have picked it up, and those middlemen should have paid us some more tax because they have not even passed it on to the farmers. Now that's for me is the congratulation along who is benefiting from this. Little wonder the discussion is intellectually read and not practically read from the real farmer's point of view. So if one was breakdown, you would get to these middlemen, the exporters and tax them. Even if you tax them $1, they would remain with more than what they thought they would get. And so they wouldn't have any complaint. Or they shouldn't have any complaint, but I know they would complain, but government would have been able to realize possibly $150 million out of taxing this windfall. Windfalls should always be taxed. That's basic, rudimentary, but basic economics.
All right, let's hear from Madam Jane Nalunga, your initial take on this debate that is going on. Dr. Mumza seems to suggest that we are focusing completely in a different area. We should be focusing on other issues as far as coffee is concerned.
Okay, thank you so much, and good evening once again, our listeners. And it's good that we are discussing this issue of coffee because coffee is our cash cow. And there has been a lot of struggles around coffee. Some people want to get a bigger share, and there has also been a lot of mistrust, from a large section of Ugandans for whatever government position it takes there's a lot of mistrust. Right from the peanut issue, there's a lot of mistrust that government wants to take our coffee. So when you look at the issue of even looking for markets, going to Serbia, that money for teaching people how to
drink coffee.
To drink coffee. So when you look at again this issue of UCDA, we need also to bring to know that we are coming from that position of distrust, that people are not comfortable. Whatever government says, they are not comfortable. I agree with Fred that we are focusing on a wrong issue, because I think we need to go back and look at what's the challenge facing the coffee sector today. Coffee is our cash cow, but we are where we are getting some little money out of coffee because of the windfall, because of challenges in Brazil,
misfortunes of others.
And I remember that also happened with vanilla, misfortunes of others in Madagascar. So we need to look at those actual challenges facing the sector. The issue of value, to ensure that the entire value chain actors get something, commensurate to what they are putting in. Because when you look at today how much the small scale producers are getting, it's very little compared to how much they are putting in. Because today coffee seedling, this cutting can go up to 3,000. That KR10, somebody was selling it at 5,000, one seedling. So that's a big challenge. Then you look at even what government is also getting, because we liberalized. When you look at all these companies which are exporting, they are the ones who are capturing the value. Government, we are getting very little. Again, for me, that's a challenge, because all these Chiagalanyi, what you hear the name, and you think they are Ugandan companies, they are multinational companies, and they are taking out all the value. There are challenges of quality. Our quality is not good, but also productivity. When you go to the village, by the way, you can think some coffee is growing wild. So we haven't reached that optimum where we can be able to say that we are really growing coffee, the right quality. You remember the penalty issue, the screen 18 became one issue, because we are producing, very coffee beans which are very small. So screen 18 became an issue during penalty discussion. So these are all the issues which we need to look at. Issues of value addition, And the moment Brazil and Vietnam put their house in order, you will see the price going down. So we need to add value. We need to be able to link coffee to the pharmaceutical. That's what Fred was saying. Coffee has pharmaceutical properties. Cosmetics, I have told you, coffee oil is selling like hot cake in Addis Ababa. So we need to be able to look at. And when you look at what we are discussing today, tribal sentiments, we are reducing that debate so low. And for me, I'm disappointed with what's going on in Parliament. That debate is like a primary debate,
Primary school debate.
What are the pros and cons and what, So we need to go a little bit higher to up the game when we are talking about these issues. And I think one issue which we need to look at is the issue of institutions. Because for me, what hurts me most is for the president to say that all the gains which have been made Operation was creation. Which is okay, because at the end of the day, if I'm growing coffee, for me what I want is government to help me with inputs, with extension service, whether it's coming from Operation Wealth Creation or UCDA or the ministry, I don't care, But if they are telling us that all these gains are from Operation Wealth Creation, but we are paying salaries, we are running UCDA, money is going there. You know, we have a ministry. And I remember this debate about retaining UCDA. Some people were talking about Ministry of Agriculture. And I said, really, is this our ministry? You know, we are spending money, taxpayers' money, to be able to put this ministry in place. But the way it was bashed, I'm telling you, Kenneth, there is no way a country can develop without institutions.
And the key institution we are looking at here is UCDA. You've been interacting with them.
Yes, we have.
And the sentiments that you're talking about, we've had people actually, they seem to suggest that the coffee subsector is doing well because of the interventions, the focus that UCDA has given to it. And therefore, when you move its functions to the ministry, which is too big, the gains are going to be lost.
Yeah. For me, I
Do
agree.
you agree?
I agree to that. And I agree if you have a cash cow, you know, you handle it with care. And when you look at right from history, when we started growing coffee as a country, there has been an institution to look after coffee. As cotton, there was one for
there
cotton.
There have been
authorities. Not boards and all that to look after that product.
We had
because
the Coffee Marketing Board.
Yes, the Coffee Marketing Board. For me, the way I look at it today is to be able, instead of putting our resources all over the place, let us put our resources under UCDA. Let us, its mandate is okay. When you look at, maybe strengthen its mandate. Because when you look at the Coffee Act, the National Coffee Act 2021, clearly if UCDA, because UCDA has no resources, by the way, very little money. It's the same as Ministry of Agriculture, very little money, you know. So for me, it hurts me that we have all these institutions, they are not well funded, we are bashing them. If they are not doing well, then because an institution, you can't say an institution is not working, it's the people. Then remove the people.
All right.
Put in people who can be able to work.
All right. Let me bring in Dr. Mumza. Dr. Mumza, President Yoweri Museveni, in a document which he shared on his social handles, explains the genesis of coming up with these authorities, and then says the gains that are being talked about are not, you know, because of these institutions. One would ask, are the reasons that had these institutions put in place the first time gone away? Do we now, for instance, are we now comfortable to say now we can do without Coffee Development Authority?
Yes, certainly, of course, institutions evolve to match the needs of the day. People are forgetting, maybe some don't know because they are younger or others hadn't been following up the structure adjustment program. The thing that really revived the coffee in the 80s and 90s, you would be looking at issues of what happened in research. And I was privileged in 1987 up to about 1990 to be living on Kawanda Research Station. USAID was literally investing heavily to revive the Kawanda Research Station. Let's not forget it was at the heart of the war. The Museveni war, people had looted everything. So they invested there to revive the labs, they trained some of the technicians and did a lot of things. And one of the key research that was happening at that time was coffee, being led by the late Kibirige Sebunya, who was hosting me as a young boy in his own house. So I was following his own research, would go in the labs. Those were the colonial days when what they used, I think, to call Kayovu, the coffee wilt disease that had wiped out coffee plants in Masaka and the rest of Uganda. Reduced production to 30% in some areas and to 0 in others. So you cannot forget those efforts that did not happen, and that happened even before UCDA, that brought us where we are today, to find the varieties. But also when they liberalized, remember you sell coffee in dollars, and now you come back to translate your dollars into shillings. So the liberalization of the exchange rate regime allowed the coffee farmers to pick more, because remember this coffee used to be exchanged on a fixed government rate, which was so overvalued that people would get cheated. Now when they liberalized, people began to get closer to the real export value, the international value. Now that encouraged the farmers to come back and grow the coffee. Now all those were efforts, but also there were computations of who should be in the coffee sector? What are their domestic resource costs? Because you really want people to get a positive return on investment, not just grow coffee for the sake. So there were all these efforts of non-traditional export crops and the traditional export crops. So liberalization was really to make sure, can we get prices and incentives correct for the farmers, including the coffee farmers? Now, who was best suited to do that? An agricultural policy secretariat was placed right inside Bank of Uganda. It's no longer there, meaning institutions can really transform as and when the needs do change. What you want to make sure is don't lose the objective that the institution was doing. So I want somebody to come and tell us, this is what UCDA is doing. If you take it into agriculture, who literally develop the regulations, you will lose it. UCDA right now, part of the duplication that is being raised, will have its own extension services across the country. Now we have another parallel set of extension services poorly funded under the local governments. So that's another function you can really shift into the local governments.
But you see,
for easier supervision.
Jen here tells you if you have a cash cow,
yes,
you should treat it well.
Now this is
coffee is strategic.
Exactly. This is the next. This is the next.
We need to be careful how we handle it.
This is the next mistake
Give it
that people
special
make.
attention.
And the studies have given to us who benefits from the coffee yield. Studies that were done in the 90s to evaluate the impact of these reviews indicated that the farmers who benefited from coffee and the other traditional cash exports, coffee, cotton, tobacco, are those who also invested more in food. Now, if you are going to earn your coffee millions and then spend them buying potatoes, because your land is small, you have been attracted to do the coffee, the net effect on that household may be negative. So you don't want to say, let me protect the cash cow, when the cash cow is raising money and the money is disappearing into an un- or poorly funded education system, poorly funded health system. Now, that is where you want to say, can the savings coming out of these go and improve the healthcare system, go and improve the education system, so that the farmers benefit from both ends. They will still have their coffee, and I want to be sure that the alternatives of maintaining those benefits from the coffee for the coffee farmers by mainstreaming to say this extension service provider now belonging to the local government should provide advice for beans, for maize, which people are going to eat, for coffee, for goats, so that this farmer whose livelihood is diversified is secured from all angles. Right now, you have certain areas without any extension service provider. Maybe government should have come up to say the savings are going to go here so that people have a benefit of seeing what the rationalization is meaning. That when I go into Masaka and save these 200 million, I'm going to invest them in the roads. Because right now we are seeing the suffering of the roads. You can have your coffee and you can't evacuate it to Masaka town because the culverts are broken, the roads can't be repaired. So we need to take a broader look and say, what is it that government is trying to address? Otherwise, you will have your coffee and the fuso can't reach you. If it does reach you, you are going to be given a very low price. And that's why you are hearing people are getting $1.50, 6,000. Yet the international coffee price is 4.7. So these fellows are receiving quite a very small portion, less than 30%. Yet in the 90s, they were getting 70% of that yield. Now, until we do those serious analytics at that micro level, because ultimately, the beneficiaries of coffee are not going to benefit in the aggregates. We received $1.2 billion. There is that particular farmer in Chiboga, that particular farmer in Kayunga. What is he or she getting? Is he able to take their child to school where now there is no nurse and then they have to go to a private facility? And the president is saying, hey, these government doctors should not go into private facilities. Now you'll have a bigger mix. That the private facility is the only one with some drugs and maybe a functioning theater. But the only doctor in that whole district is a government doctor. So should he remain where there is no service? We need a more comprehensive approach, because coffee is really a significant contributor, but how is it going to contribute massively to the economic growth, but more so household welfare?
Right, Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90. We need to go for a break now, but keep your comments coming. Share with us. What do you think about this ongoing debate about rationalizing UCDA? Dr. Fred Muhumza seems to suggest that UCDA can be scrapped as long as we maintain the standards, the functions that it has been actually carrying out. Jane Nalunga from Siatin seems to say well, when you have a cash cow,
She's in the swing state.
please do not actually touch it. She is in a swing state like Dr. Mumza says. So we need to hear from you. Share with us via the WhatsApp line 0703 090 090. Spectrum continues after this break.
Spectrum on Radio 1 FM 90.
You can't come to the Sheraton? Worry not. Sheraton will come to you. Order your favorite meal for you and your family at your home, office, or special function. We deliver breakfast, lunch.
Well, we're glad you're still with us on Spectrum, live on Radio 1 FM 90, broadcasting on its website, www.radio1fm90.com. You click on the icon with the word Listen Live on the different radio listening apps, which can be obtained from the Google stores of your smartphone, live on DSTV audio channel 897. Our topic of discussion, we are looking at the whole baloo over rationalization of the Uganda Coffee Development Authority. I'm speaking to Dr. Fred Muhumza, Senior Economist, Director, Economic Forum, Makerere University Business School, Ms. Jen Nalunga, Executive Director, Siatini Uganda, Business and Trade Expert. Siatini Uganda has been conducting a number of discussions, and it has a program specifically on the coffee value chain. So we're trying to make sense of the unending debate about rationalization of UCDA. One group says you touch UCDA, you're touching the coffee farmers and the benefits that they were already getting. The government insisting, and President Yoweri Museveni has also insisted, that we do not need UCDA to actually move the coffee subsector forward. So what could be, the balancing act there for us to actually not to lose the benefits that we're already getting from the coffee value chain. Madam Nalunga, you heard from Dr. Muhumza there insisting that, we can still do better even without UCDA. What are some of the things that you have heard from the people you've been, discussing with, issues to do with the coffee value chain? What message, what kind of arguments are they making for UCDA, to the extent that you are also thinking that they should not be touched?
Okay. For me, when you look at, when you go to the villages and look at what people are saying, people are concerned about the price of their coffee, the way it fluctuates, the issue of being ripped off by middlemen. That issue is very, very important. The issue of the very expensive inputs. The issue of the lack of extension services. In the villages, everybody is an expert when it comes to coffee and other production, because there are no extension workers. Issues of even where to dry their coffee. So these are the actual challenges on the ground.
But these challenges are existing when we have UCDA.
They are there, and that's why I'm saying
so they are not also
that
effective.
UCDA, whether those problems are addressed by Operation Wealth Creation or UCDA, it doesn't matter. So if the president is saying they were done by Operation Wealth Creation,
the increase in production.
Then it's also an institution. So, in fact, he's emphasizing the fact that we need an institution to be able to address these challenges. And for me,
actually, Operation Wealth Creation is not an institution. It's just a project, something like that.
A project or whatever. But
UCDA is an institution.
Yeah, but we need something special to address those challenges. And for me, when I look at UCDA, whether it's because of lack of resources, it's not doing enough. All those challenges I have enumerated on the ground, UCDA is not doing enough. And that's why we need an institution to be able to address those special challenges. But I also agree to what Fred is saying, that we need some level of coordination, because what I have seen, there is a lot of duplication of roles from Ministry of Agriculture. Then you go to those projects,
Operation
Wealth Creation, then UCDA. We need coordination. Then there is the issue which has been raised.
Who, in your view, should be fully in charge of the coffee subsector, looking at those different institutions?
Because you see, the mother ministry is agriculture, and you can't run away from agriculture. you know. And I go back to what Fred has raised, that when you are planting coffee, by the way, you can mix it with bananas, you know, and people need to know that bananas and coffee go together. You have the bananas, you have food, you have also an income. So that kind of coordination has to be done by the Ministry of Agriculture. And we are not saying UCDA should move completely like an independent authority. Its mother organization
should retains control.
Exactly, retain control, retain the coordination. There is an issue which has also been raised about the salaries, that UCDA people, they get a lot of money. Those are minor issues. Then address it. Address the salary.
The president himself was justifying this pay. That by the time they took a decision, they decided that they needed to pay these people better in order for them to do a good job.
No, that is not. That shouldn't be, because everybody in the Ministry of Agriculture is doing a job. So why? And that's why there is all this struggle for people saying, why should they be paid better when they are not doing anything? So for me, I think if a section or an authority is put in place, it shouldn't be at the expense of the entire ministry. And these are issues which we need to discuss. You know, Fred has raised the issue of the policy, the structure adjustment policies. And it's important also to look at what are those policies we are following when it comes to the coffee sector. Fred has pointed out clearly that under the structure adjustment programs, we liberalized. Liberalization had its own challenges because we brought the private sector on table and the role of the state was minimized. So when you look at what government is also doing, you know, intervening in the sector, it's not yet clear what role government wants to play, you know, in the coffee sector. So again, because for me, I believe that when we liberalized, like Fred has said, the coffee value chain actors could get more money than when government was in control. But who is getting that money? Because the farmers are still getting little. They are still at the mercy of the middlemen. So what I'm driving at is that, again, we need to review and reassess what should be the role of the state vis-a-vis the role of the private sector in the entire value chain. I remember at one time there used to be the Starbucks funds. Remember that? Starbucks funds. And I remember the European Union used to put a lot of money in the Starbucks funds. These funds were to stabilize exports, to make sure that the small-scale producers are happy to continue growing what they are growing. Because every year, you know, the price of coffee would go up. So when you look at the way we changed policies in the late 1980s under the structure adjustment program, is to throw away the baby with the bathwater, you know. We throw away everything. Let us liberalize, let us privatize, let us deregulate. And this is also what we are doing, swinging from UCDA, take it back to the ministry, without doing a thorough analysis. What are the challenges, the mischief we want to address, and how best can we address it?
All right. Dr. Mumza, your quick analysis of how this rationalization process has been handled, when you hear what some people are saying, that we needed to do analysis on institutions that are actually bringing in money vis-a-vis those that are basically, you know, choking the taxpayer. Generally speaking, about the rationalization process beyond even the Uganda Coffee Development Authority, have we done this process well? I'm already seeing some reports that is it World Bank and IMF, they are holding back funds because of rationalizing UNRWA and things like that. Are we not likely to land in more problems because of what we have done?
Yeah, we certainly might run into problems because the rationalization agenda was narrowed and made, should I say, sentimental and emotional in a number of ways. Like Jane is saying, throwing away the baby with the bathwater. There are certain agencies where you don't want to bring in a debate of salary differences, and yet people are rolling out the salary differences across the board. So there were certain institutions that came in because the donors really, or the development partners as we call them, were not so comfortable putting money into the country. Going by our poor governance levels, they did not want to put money where they were not sure some value for money could come out. And so they jointly with government agreed, let's set up independent agencies. Because if there is a board of UNRWA, you can hold that board and executive director easily accountable. Let's use our example of, sadly, Dorothy Kisaka and her team. What if these were ministers? Do you think they would be there? Certainly not. Now, this is not to say they are guilty, and how I wish they come out and we look at the issue more objectively. So some donors, development partners felt, if these activities are in the mainstream of government, it becomes very difficult to pin down somebody, and even for somebody to really sit down and say, this is my docket, these are my terms of reference, I am going to deliver on them, and I have freedom to take a decision. If an employee is not delivering to me, that employee will go. I was tracking a story of one of the agencies who said, you don't qualify for this job, and the person made it political. Went and carried his entire constituency of politicians and citizens from his district, brought them to the president to beg, to say this person, our son has been denied a job. But this person had taken the authority to say, no, we have a criteria here on who comes in and who gets promoted. And the head of the institution lived to secure their interest. Now, there are certain areas where you can only secure the deliverable under such an agency to give comfort to your partners. They may be giving in money, or they may be putting in all the other kinds of things. Now, that was shelved. And people just came and said, salaries, how are these people earning more salaries there? Then your minister has the commissioner supervising them as less. For heaven's sake, salaries are not streamlined across the board. There are certain conditions that come with salary. So that is number one that was lost out. The second thing, RAPEX was rationalization of agencies, but more importantly, the entire public expenditure, which goes beyond the agencies. And we needed to look into those specific places. There are lots of civil servants, and we're having this discussion which is going on. How much should the civil servant be paid? Remember, in 1998, we consolidated pay because people were paid a salary, housing allowance, medical allowance, lunch allowance, transport allowance, and the other allowances were not taxable at the time. Then we felt people were now paying very little for salary, which would be taxable, and putting all the benefits, which were not taxable. So they consolidated it. But still, it means that if a civil servant is being paid 500,000, part of that is transport to work, is where they rent. So what are you actually paying that civil servant? Now, the agencies had resolved that, because for them, when you're negotiating for a salary, you bring all these things on the table and say, I have to sleep here, I have to do this, or my real take home is this, which is not possible in the civil service. And that can be a challenge that genuinely being raised, that some people may not even be willing to go into the civil service to work. A few who will be willing to go there will go there with an intention to say, let me go and see how I balance out my budgets, my revenues and expenditures. We needed to rationalize public expenditure entirely and look into the dynamics of how best can we scale down even the other parts of government, including the same ministries where some of these agencies are being pushed into. Everybody has agreed Minister of Agriculture needs the address. It's not functioning. So what measures are in place to make sure that even as you said UCDA and CDO and DDA into agriculture, agriculture is itself being restructured to deliver and improve on its efficiency, the very same things we are accusing these institutions now. That is out there. Ultimately, I want to really speak to why the broader scope, why there was an agricultural policy secretariat in Bank of Uganda. I'm looking at the exchange rate mid-average of March 2024. It was about 3,856. The exchange rate of September, just last month, is 3,710. 113. Meaning there is a difference of 143 shillings shortfall. Now, if anybody exports coffee and earns $1 million and comes to exchange, that person is going to make a loss of 143 million shillings just because of the exchange rate. Now, UCDA can't fix that. But that's a total loss to the coffee farmers and their in-between entities. Now, during that other time of the 80s, the exchange rate was being monitored for those disadvantages that were being passed out of the coffee. So meaning the coffee debate along the value chain needs to be expanded beyond what UCDA is doing to what is our monetary policy, what are our macro policies, and the stabilization tax that I talked about. Coffee was earning the country in 1994 about $180 million. But because of that frost in Brazil, it was going to bring in $500 million. Now, because we are trying to stabilize the shilling and the price stability, that's why government said, no, let's pick this windfall because it's going to bring monetary instability. That's why they introduced the coffee stabilization tax. Now, with the coffee yields out of this frost, having jumped from 800 to 1.2 billion, the extra $400 million has been driving inflation. And we did not look into that direction. Instead, we raised the central bank rate, and which has now killed even the other crops and investments elsewhere. Now, that for me is the broader discussion that needs to be put here, that how do you institute the government role, literal own policy, regulation for everybody, not just isolating this particular coffee farmer. Because that coffee farmer is also going to suffer because of the high interest rate.
And we are not saying
Very quickly before we have on the listener.
We are not mandating UCDA
No,
to do
that's why I'm
those
saying the debate is broader than
Yeah,
UCDA.
But then also the issue you are talking about of 1M, people $1 million and bringing back the money which goes out,
Yes,
it never comes back.
of course. Those are issues to
That's
address. So where
That's
are we?
why we have a capital flight and IFFs and
So
it
we all
never
agree that the
comes
coffee
back.
debate has been so much narrowed to
Narrowed,
UCD,
yes,
and we have
we
lost,
need a
we've
broader
lost the
one.
locus.
Yeah.
All right, we have comments that are coming in from the listeners, and very quickly, I'll read some of them. I begin with this comment. Dr. Muhumza is not very accurate. A coffee tree looked after well will give you about 3 kilograms of prost berries. That is 10 kilograms of ripe berries, 5 kilograms of kiboko, and 3 kilograms of
The word
ase.
is looked after well.
Yes.
Exactly. What I'm giving is the evidence on the ground, because most of them are not being looked after well.
Killing UCDA leaves the multi-billion-dollar coffee sector in the hands of a cartel of the Pinetis and the guys who got 30 billion from Museveni to build Inspire Africa coffee plant in Ntungamo, who are already saying they have been given a monopoly over Ugandan coffee. Why give a monopoly to Inspire Africa, who got money from State House and disregard Star Cafe, which used to ship coffee to Mwanza and now built their own plant in Namave using their own funds? Same way the president took away Kampala bus transport from guys who built their capacity, handling the deal, to those who had never operated a bus service. It beats my mind. That's a comment from John, listening in from Nakawa. Good evening, Kenneth. George from Bunga. Kenneth, why has the president pulled all energies on UCDA as a parasitic institution instead of putting energies on, one, reducing the size of parliament, reducing RDCs, districts, reducing state house budget, to show commitment that he's serious and has a goodwill on what he's doing. But when it comes to those ones, he's very silent. Secondly, President Museveni has set a precedence that even if he brings something in good faith, citizens lost trust in him, basing on past history and how things have been happening. We have another comment. Good evening, Spectrum. Kauka in Mukono, there seems to be lack of what to do. Most of us don't understand the dynamics of coffee value chain. UCDA is just a name of a government institution introduced by the president. He can call it another name. Now he wants it to be part of MAIF. Where is the problem? Then somebody else writes in, UCDA is also under government and actually under MAIF. What is the problem of just shifting offices? UCDA has now outlived its usefulness, and you like it or not, it will just disappear. Maybe if you consider reviving cooperatives. It seems most of these people just want to demonize the NRM. I wonder whether they have alternatives. The Pineti question made Ugandans lose trust in the government. That's Mike in Mukono. Thanks, Kenneth, for the program. Charles from Wakiso, Town Council. I don't understand what is done by UCDA that can't be done by MAIF if the funding is the same. It is just the motivation through good funding that does the job, but the question of where it is done does not exist. Yiga Samuel writes in and says, yes, some agencies have not performed well and need to be rationalized, but some have performed very well, like UCDA. Therefore, most MPs are insisting for UCDA not to be rationalized. Why then does President Museveni want to remove it? He destroyed cooperatives, which used to be for the downtrodden people. Let him and his officials focus on issues. Raila listening in from Nairobi. According to Madam Nalunga, submission, since UCDA is working more than the ministry, then the government should dissolve the Ministry of Agriculture and UCDA remains. Listening live from Nairobi. Thank you very much, Raila, for tuning in. John Muzanganda in Matuga, thanks for the program. Our government is suffering from trust issues. Even if the government is coming up with something better, Ugandans find it hard to believe in them. Benon Fred Twina Masco, I saw the lady marketing the digital number plate saying that the system will be able to send, well, this I think is completely for a different show. We have another comment. History will judge us. The Agriculture Ministry is in limbo. Do you remember the Uganda Commercial Bank debate? Do you remember the Uganda Airlines debate and how those decisions were regretted later? We forget easily and emotionally. Make decisions. Maso Kulutimbe, that is Lumbuye Lawrence, listening in from Zigoti. UCDA has done tremendously well in promoting and popularizing coffee production all over Uganda. We now have coffee in Lango, Acholi, Singiro, Bushenyi, Teso, etc. UCDA should be maintained as an independent entity to specifically promote coffee value chains, attract big coffee projects that will benefit Ugandan farmers, and open more gates to international markets. That's Aroma Patrick listening in from Lira side. Then we have another comment. Some MPs in Parliament passed Coffee Act, but now they are blindfolding us after, and yet the Coffee Act itself is deadly. Coffee and UCDA questions to Dr. Fred Muhumuza. Your logic point of view is valid, but if the government was effectively managed, do those who want to take up coffee have any good reputation? Number 2, mention just one crop the Ministry of Agriculture has successfully improved in the last 10 years. Number 3, will the closure of UCDA make any savings, which was the main purpose of closing agencies? Not at all. In fact, the extravagant and luxurious expenditures in government are mainly ballooned Parliament, Cabinet, and the V8 gasolers. The offices citizens can comfortably live without, such as RDCs. Therefore, they should keep off UCDA, and Ugandans struggle as usual until God sends an intervention. Well, those are some of the comments that are coming in. Another one here, the government is set to review a proposal to establish new administrative units ahead of Uganda's 2026 general elections, according to local government minister Raphael Magezi, who has been directed to submit a proposal on the creation and operationalization of administrative units. Where is the logic? Well, those are some of the comments that are coming in from the listeners. Let's quickly respond to them, and I'll begin with you, Dr. Fred Muhumuza.
Well, I think the observations of the listeners are relevant. As we've said, they are good. It's good Ugandans are engaging. All we are asking for is people should put logic and let's use the statistics. It is quite difficult in research where some of us spend our days and nights to give attribution and say because the change is here, it is by this institution. It is true. If you look at the volume of coffee exports in millions of 60 kilogram bags, they increased from 3.6 in 2015 to 4.17 in 2018. You go to 6.11 in 2023. Now, between 2015 and 2016, the international price actually fell from 1.86 to 1.74, whereas yields were going up. Now, you can attribute that to so many factors. And as I said, my first one that I would want to give the credit to is narrow, because they produced Robusta 10, 9 and 10 in 2017, which literally were more resistant to RBD and CWD being coffee wilt disease. So give them credit that they found a variety that was able to withstand the drought, the diseases, the pests, and all those kinds of things to make sure the yields come through. You don't want to take that out from them. Then where UCDA was supporting the distribution of planting materials, NADS and OWC were also involved in that same space. So there it is very hard to say who actually did what, but it tells us, for us, stop discussing specific institutions, because NADS and the OWC are now out. When PDM came, they said give people the money let them buy for themselves what they want. Now, some people may actually find a better crop that is yielding for them, and they abandon coffee. You want also to be watching that. But when that comes in, we should be discussing what needs to be done. As we've said, extension services and a decentralized system of government belongs to the local governments. Can we empower the local government to have these extension services for all enterprises and animals, as you may want to think of them? Because as Jen rightly noted, this is one of the complaints people are raising out there. The cost of planting material, the cost of inputs, and part of this includes credit. People are borrowing from money lenders. Now, look at what the reality is. School fees comes, now children are sitting exams. Coffee, you haven't sold it. You go to a money lender to borrow to pay school fees. You go to a money lender to borrow to pay for a medical emergency. Now, when you sell,
they even sell the flour.
Exactly. When you sell your coffee, this person
Flour.
doesn't have anything. The coffee was mortgaged. These realities need to come through, and that's why I say don't analyze at the broad level. Let's get down at the household level. There are so many people who are literally picking nothing out of the coffee because they mortgage the flour. So when you look at all these particular details, the conversation should go beyond UCDA.
All right. Very quickly, Jen, I will come to you for your closing remarks and response to some of these issues that have come across.
The responses are relevant, and they are some of them are very interesting. I know Laida was being cheeky that we dissolve the ministry. But I think it goes back to strengthening our institution.
Yes.
For me, for one, I don't really mind, whether UCDA is there, whether OWC is there, whether the ministry, as long as that institution is delivering on the challenges we have enumerated here. For me to say we want an institution like UCDA is because there are so many challenges. And by the way, I'm not saying UCDA is also doing a good job. The challenges are there, yes. And they are many, too many, for us to be able to say that our coffee sector is out of the woods. But there is also an issue which has been raised, which is very important. It's about the prudent use of resources. If we are closing this is the UCDA because of money, then we'll have a challenge.
All right.
Because for me, what I think, we need to prudently use our resources,
all right.
But we need to see how we minimize wasteful expenditure and we direct money where it's supposed to go.
All right. This debate will actually continue. We'll intend to hear from the different stakeholders in the coffee value chain, but also we'll be following the resumption of the debate in Parliament. This particular week, we understand the President has also summoned the NRM caucus to actually debate the same issue. Now, this edition of Spectrum comes to an end. Up next, we have the news in English with Miss Lillian Keno. Thereafter, we'll have that Soul Train with BB Junior.